back in the late 80s, early 90s, I believe. So like Nabisco, Kraft, General Foods, these kinds of companies started using a lot of these artificial chemicals in their foods to make them addictive.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching our videos. If you'd like to support us some more, you can explore our homemade natural skincare products at purelytallow.com. Thank you so much for supporting my small business. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Serena and this is the Carnivore Revolution. And today I'm talking with Scotty Brizzle. And Scotty has an amazing Instagram page. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. Today we're having an amazing conversation about the tobacco companies and how they took your favorite snack food companies to the next level and got you addicted by using something called the bliss point. We talked about Nina Teicholz's book, The Big Fat Surprise, and Ansel Keys, and how he just might have started the worst failed science experiment of all time when he helped create the nutritional guidelines. Scotty Brizzle, we've never actually met face-to-face before, so this is good. Really great to see you. Thanks for doing this for me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's about time. It's about
I know.
time that we met because we're definitely pushing the same message and on the same
Yeah.
journey. So yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for me too. And pushing that message is exactly why we're here. So I want to start with your story though, like doing this, what made you decide that this was the route you were going to take with your diet?
Well, this ended up being like the last option for me. I held in there for as long as I can, doing all the things that I thought I was supposed to do.
Right.
And, because we get taught options like vegetarianism or, I don't know, I went out and supplements and just cut out gluten and cut out dairy and those stock standard answers to try and I guess, resolve certain health issues. I had a lot of autoimmune issues that affected my gut, my skin, my joints and muscles and that kind of stuff. And I honestly thought that that was just going to be my life, and there wasn't really. This is just something I'm going to have to live with. But I heard about the carnivore diet from Dr. Sean Baker on Rogan's podcast, like back in 2017. But I didn't see it as an option then because I just wasn't in the right mind frame. And it took until I was just absolutely debilitated. My back was against the wall and there was no other options. And it was actually Michaela Peterson sharing her story and how I could relate to so many of the things she was saying that made me actually try this. So I started trying this carnivore diet on and off. I was addicted to sugar and carbohydrates. And so it was quite hard for me to release those food addictions. And so it was back and forth for quite a while until I actually stuck to it. But once I decided to do it, I was only going to do this for 3 months. I said to myself, 3 months carnivore, that's it. Then I can introduce all the crap again and I'll be able to tolerate everything because I had every food intolerance pretty much under the sun that was just wiping me out, gut problems up to the wazoo. And by the end of that 3 months, I actually had a reference point of how good I could feel. Issues that I've had for years, even like little niggling issues, like my knee pain from a bone disorder that I've got, teeth sensitivity, all these like smaller sorts of things, a little bit of back pain and that. The major issues got a lot better, like the gut stuff, the skin stuff, all of that. But it was quite mind blowing. But I thought I would experiment and I introduced some sushi and coconut water after 3 months. The next day, joint flare-ups, skin flare-ups, the anxiety through the roof, irritability, and that was all I needed to make the decision, well, this is what I'm doing. And here I am 2 years, a few months in doing carnivore, and I try and stick to the lion diet of just ruminant meat and salt, and that works absolute wonders for me. And I never, ever get sick of it. I never get sick of it. I just can't get enough steak.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I am never sick of the foods that I'm eating. I never now I go through phases. Like I did a lot of sardines and then I kind of got sick of sardines. And I do kind of have an egg threshold where if I'm eating like 6 or 7 eggs, sometimes I get to like that last one and I think, nope, can't do it. And so I do, but I don't like get sick of being a carnivore. I feel like we have so many options and people look at this like it's restrictive, but I don't feel that way at all.
No, not at all. People say, I can't believe you're so restrictive and disciplined.
Yeah.
It's got to be hard. And I'm like, this is the freest I've ever felt in my life. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and the thing is, if people really sat down and looked at their diets, they're going to see that they eat the same foods over and over and over again too. They just eat garbage foods
Hmm.
mostly instead of good, healthy foods that make you feel good.
Yeah, and they keep feeling like crap over and over and over. Like, I knew that every time I would eat pizza, I knew that I wasn't going to feel good, but that 10, 15 minutes of like mouth pleasure and
Yeah,
deliciousness that I would get was apparently worth it. I don't
I know. I
crazy.
know. And the thing that strikes me most about what you said, I mean, not strikes me most, but that's interesting is that you heard about it first from Joe Rogan and Sean Baker. And I think like 95% of people start the carnivore diet because they saw that podcast. Almost
Yeah.
everybody says that's where they heard about it the first time. It's pretty amazing for the two of them. They get so much credit for helping so many people.
I like to see Sean Baker as like the godfather of carnivore, and it's honestly like it blows me away when he shares some of my content or
Yeah,
he collaborates on posts and that. I'm like, this is the guy. This is
I
crazy.
know.
This is the guy that
I,
started it all.
I actually think that's how I found you, was one of your posts that Sean Baker either shared to a story or collaborated on or something like that. But I was glad because when I went to your page, I just see some really great, amazing things. And I also want to say that you said you went into it, you did it for 3 months, and then you tried other things, and that you didn't set out to do this permanently. And I think so many of us are in that situation. Like we come to this and we think, well, I'm just going to try it. Some people say 30 days, some say 60, some say 90, and they try it and then they think, wow, this is just so amazing. I feel so good. And so most people stick with it, but a lot of people do what you did and they think, I'm going to go ahead and try some stuff.
Mm.
And then
And
they're like,
bad idea. Bad,
bad idea.
because my mentality was still that old way of thinking where I
Yeah.
just want to heal my leaky gut or these food intolerances so I can start eating the crap again.
Yeah. I know.
Um,
And that's the thing is so many people will come off the carnivore diet, go back to eating the garbage, and then they'll say, "Oh, I tried that. That didn't work for me."
mm,
Because as soon as I went off of it, all of my symptoms came back. Yeah, it's because if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. And so if you go
yeah.
back to eating the foods that got you in that shape, I mean, that just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And
Mhm.
I found like I overcomplicated everything back then. I was trying supplement after supplement. I was going from
Mhm.
doctor to doctor and spending so much money and thinking this next supplement stack that I'll
Yes.
find will be the answer that I'll finally this probiotic, or if I have some resveratrol with some berberine, and then maybe if I stack that with some vitamin C, and I thought these were going to be the answers, but turns out it was getting rid of all of these, getting rid of
Mhm.
digestive enzymes, getting rid of all the probiotics, and just sticking to a steak on a plate with some salt. That was the answer. Who would have thought? Like, it's a
Yeah,
miracle.
I know. I know. Who would have thought? But I've been gluten-free for a long time because when I guess my now 17-year-old was maybe like 5. She had a rash. We were trying to figure out what it was. And I told her that if she would go off wheat, I would do it with her. And we had friends that were gluten-free. So she did it with me. And it took about 3 weeks for me to realize what her problem was. She had gotten up in the middle of the night, like every night since she was a baby. Like she was a horrible sleeper. And she slept great for those like 3 weeks. And then somebody gave her some wheat. And when she got home an hour later, she said, I'm all itchy and my legs won't be still. I was like, oh my goodness, I have punished you in the middle of the night, like, pick her up, put her back in her bed, pick her up, put her back in her bed, pick her up, put her back in her bed for years when she would get up in the middle of the night. And she had restless leg syndrome like I did. And I
Mm.
realized in that moment that mine hadn't been bothering me for the last 3 weeks either. And do you know I had been to doctor after doctor, but nobody ever said this could be wheat. Nobody ever said that. When I was pregnant with our youngest, this was before I knew about that the restless leg syndrome was caused by the wheat. I actually had to take Valium because I couldn't sleep because my legs were so bad when I was pregnant. I was making homemade bread with extra gluten in it, because that makes it rise more and makes it fluffier. I was making homemade pizza. I was making dessert pizza. I mean, we were eating homemade whole wheat bread every single day, every day
Mm.
without fail. We would go through a loaf or two in a day, and I had no idea that I was causing myself the kind of damage that I was, that I would risk my pregnancy and take Valium to be able to get through my pregnancy. And there's just not enough information out there about nutrition. And I don't know about there, but the doctors here in the United States get like maybe 6 hours of nutrition training. What's it like there in Australia? Is it the same? Do they get like no nutrition training?
It's very much the same. I feel like it's the same cookie cutter education. They don't really discuss much, like other than, yeah, try and cut gluten out, try and cut dairy out. It's just those stock standard answers, but they don't go into anything sort of further than that. And
Hmm.
like like you were saying, you're making bread at home and you think, oh, that's the right thing to
That's
do.
right.
At least I'm
Hmm.
not going to the supermarket and buying the bread with the ingredients list the size of your forearm.
That's right.
But yeah,
Hmm.
and even even plant defense chemicals and that wasn't brought up a single time in my experience of years and years of bouncing from doctor to doctor to specialist. It wasn't
Hmm.
brought up once. And here I was smashing these spinach salads with
Yes.
kale and, you know, no one told me about oxalates or
Hmm.
lectins or phytic acid, or I'm
Yeah.
having oats every morning, and I was
Hmm.
wondering why my gut was just so destroyed, because I thought I was having the most healthiest option I could possibly have. And
Hmm.
the harder I tried with all of this, the worse I got.
Yeah.
And because of the lack of training with these health experts over,
Hmm.
here in Australia as well, I would have been caught in that hamster wheel still, and
Yeah.
it
Hmm.
does take it takes a lot of courage to just say to yourself, you know what, I am going to figure this out. And I remember
Hmm.
when I was in the doctor's office and I had that realization that just sort of washed over me after many visits. And there was this, I can't remember, something that he said. And I'm like, oh, I've got to figure this out myself. This is
Hmm.
my last visit here. And
Yeah.
here I am. I haven't been back to a doctor since.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And then the way the processed foods are pushed so hard, and I know you've done some research on this, so I'm going to let you talk about it, about the tobacco companies, because I think people don't know. And I would hope, like, we have to hope that if people hear the truth about how and why we are so addicted to those foods, that they'll change their eating habits. And so I try to spread this as much as I can. And I know you do too. You did a video on this recently. Let's just talk for a few minutes about the tobacco companies and how they're actually responsible for us being addicted to all of these processed foods.
Yeah, well, they were the big dogs that pretty much started they set the precedence for creating foods that make us hyper addictive because they're using hyper palatable ingredients. They literally figured out the perfect ratios of fat to sugar to we can
Salt,
even go into, sorry.
fat to sugar to salt. It's the bliss point, right?
It's it's the bliss point. And it's
Yeah.
it's perfect ratios. It took like measuring this sort of stuff to get the perfect spot on to keep us coming back for more, to thinking
Mhm.
about it more, never being satiated. So we buy more of their products. We continually eat, and then we wonder why chronic disease is through the roof. But
Mhm.
they also had a catalog of all these artificial flavors, and because cigarettes, they've got many chemicals in them. It's not just
Mhm.
nicotine.
Right.
They've got chemicals in them to burn evenly, to burn at the same rate, but also to make them as addictive as possible. And so when these tobacco companies bought up a lot of the big food companies, three of the big ones back in the late 80s, early 90s, I believe. So like Nabisco, Kraft, General Foods, these kinds of companies. That was when it all started, and they've done the studies and they've seen on that timeline where it spikes in people being addicted to processed foods. They started using a lot of these artificial chemicals in their foods to make them addictive. And like that, they were only in the biz for not too long, and I think they opted out before the 2000s. But they sort of set it up, and other processed food companies, other competitors, seen what was possible and how addictive they could make these foods. And so everyone jumped on the same, and here we are. Processed foods, some of the most addictive things on the planet.
Yeah, and part of the reason we eat so many processed foods, grains that are, heavily laced with pesticides and things like that, part of the reason we eat so much of that is because of our food pyramid, or now they call it My Plate. But it's because of that, because they recommend, basically a loaf of bread for people to eat every day. And meanwhile, they're still telling us how bad meat is for us. And I feel like it's been the biggest failed science experiment of all time. Is it the same way there in Australia? They recommend all these grains they recommend, and nobody bats an eye at the sugar and the artificial ingredients and the artificial colors and all that.
It is so sad to see that I think people do want the best for their health, but they listen to the recommendations of these mainstream sources and the diet recommendations from, the WHO or whoever it may be. I think people do want the best in themselves, but when you look back to see where these dietary changes were made, where we were told to reduce red meat, we were told to reduce fat, we were told to reduce salt, but increase our seed oil consumption, our carbohydrates, and sugar. And it's almost identical that rates of disease skyrocketed when we made these changes. And wouldn't you think if red meat and fat and, say, salt were the problem, and we eliminated all of them, wouldn't you see the drop in these issues? Like heart disease became a big problem back in the 50s, diabetes, stroke, cancers. Wouldn't you think you would see a decrease in these chronic diseases? But we've only seen them significantly elevate. And so I think a lot of this stuff, you can look back and you can see that Ansel Keys was a big player in this. I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with the Ansel Keys story, but that was pretty much a botched, manipulated study that was cherry picked to make fat the villain, where it was sugar that was the villain. But then you realize this guy got paid off by the sugar industry, and he was in the pocket of the American Heart Association. And these sorts of decisions have just led to now. And we can even go into, we've got a brand here, massive processed food brand here in Australia called Sanitarium. And that was basically started by the Seventh-day Adventists, where they wanted to basically, one of the co-founders of the church, they started this vegetarian movement because she was getting these visions. And so these people led on to Dr. Kellogg, who made Kellogg cereals, but he was the same. He was making cornflakes for people, so they it would kill sexual desire, and because meat was seen as evil. And all these old school ways that have happened so long ago have just perpetuated and led up to now, where we still have Sanitarium influencing what the doctors are taught. They're influencing the textbooks. They've got their fingers in the institutions themselves, and they're making the processed foods. So at every step at every rung of the ladder, there's influence there. And so we're still heavily influenced by these people, and we don't even know it.
Yeah, I want to go back to Ansel Keys for a minute, because I was actually just about to ask you if you had read The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz.
No, I haven't. I've heard I know. I've heard some, I've gotten a lot of information online from that book, but I haven't actually read it myself. No.
You totally have to read it. It is so good. I have it on Audible, and I actually have the paper copy now too, because I'm like, at some point this month, I would love to sit down and read through the paper copy and be able to highlight things, because I have lots of bookmarks on the audiobook, but it's not the same. I want to be able to highlight a bunch of stuff, put exclamation points after stuff, and then hand it to somebody to read. So I have it both. But I've listened to it on Audible 6 times.
That's amazing.
And I'm not kidding that every time I hear it, the 6th time was no different. I am shocked and dismayed and mad and angry and sad every time I listen to it. I mean, it's one of those books that will rock your world. I think every household, this is really how I feel. I think every household in civilized countries should read that book. I recently
Yeah.
talked to Dr. Obadia, and he said that he has heard of Ansel Keys as being referred to as the greatest mass murderer of all time because of the work
Yeah.
he did and the lies he told, taking his 22 country study and scaling it down to 7 countries, just the 7 countries that he cherry picked that went along with his hypothesis, that he single-handedly affects us even today because of the decisions he made and the things that he said. And he was loud and obnoxious, and people listened to him, made the cover of Time magazine, and destroyed lives. And we are still dealing with it today. We're still dealing with it.
Yeah, it is absolutely insane how long these sorts of things can perpetuate, and how many people, like, because you would obviously get it all the time as well. People say, aren't you on the carnivore diet? Aren't you worried about the fat consumption? Aren't you worried about cholesterol? Aren't you worried about, well, I'm like, why would I be worried about foods we've been eating since the dawn of time? You
Right.
do realize you're just caught up in this story of, it all came down to money. You followed the money
Yeah.
back, and that's what it leads to. People getting paid off.
Yeah. It's really sad. And the people my age, the people your age, and the kids, are paying the price. Even, like my parents are paying the price because this happened like in the early 70s, early 80s, I think it was. I should know that since I've listened to the book so many times. But, all of this happened a long time ago, and people are still paying the price. And I think it's going to take at least a generation, even if they started changing things now. But when I sit back and like look at what it would take to get this to change, right? Think about for America, and I'm sure that it's the same in Australia, because everything is based on those rules and the guidelines. You're talking about schools having to change everything, having to change the way they cook meals for the kids, and all of that. Nursing homes, the military, hospitals. When you think about how many of the uh, places use the guidelines to feed people and what that would take, but it's still so strange that in every hospital waiting room, there's vending machines with total and complete garbage. There's soda vending machines. When they take a meal to, a diabetic patient, it's got, 200 grams of carbohydrates, in a meal or two, and they just tell them to dose themselves afterwards. It's horrible and it's heartbreaking. And I don't know how it's going to get fixed.
And that's what they call our health care system. It is
Sick.
absolutely absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, it will have to be a rebuild from the bottom up with these systems. But it's like, well, how else are we going to get away from more, like, children are sicker than their parents these
I
days,
know.
and it's all because of these reasons. And they think, oh, if the hospital's serving this food, it must be okay. And you look at your
That's right.
tray of food, and it's just everything's in plastic, and it's been processed, or
Mhm.
processed bread, or the meat, and a meat dish that you get looks like it's come out of a microwavable meal.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrible. And that's supposed to be the pinnacle, a hospital to
Right.
make people well again. But
Yeah.
it's honestly, I feel like we can't be thriving and healthy, because how are we going to rely on pharmaceutical industry? How are we going to rely on the processed food companies? We can't be dead either, because otherwise you can't make money. So you've got
Right.
to be in this nice balance between the middle, where it's like you're not quite healthy, but you're not dying, so they can keep you on that treadmill.
And it's sad. And like you said, it's very scary because the kids are so sick. And now they just want to put these kids on Ozempic, and, they want to put these kids on statins. I can't even imagine a world where I would put my child on a medication like that before I would change the way they're eating. And I think that's the disconnect, is because a lot of people really don't look at our health conditions and relate that to the food we eat. Do you think that's true?
Honestly, we're not taught that. We're not
Right.
taught that. We get taught to mask our like, treat the symptoms, don't treat
Right.
the root cause. That's
Mhm.
what we're taught. And
Mhm.
so, not to mention the lies. If
Right.
high cholesterol, you've got high cholesterol, you see these statin companies that they're the ones that are, well, a lot of them are making these studies, funding these studies to say how statins are good. So it's like we're getting information, that the information we're getting to determine the choices we make and our diet and health. So a lot of these studies are corrupt from the get-go. So it's, who do you trust? And it's one of those things. Well, I'm starting to trust a lot of these independent doctors, whether that's Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Robert Kiltz, Dr. Paul Mason, all these amazing doctors that are at the front line. And a great one's Dr. Gary Fetke, who's a doctor here in Tasmania. And he was recommending this low carb diet years ago. And then APRA come for him, the medical system come for him, because he was actually healing patients and getting people away from diabetes medication. And so the people that actually try to help and actually do well, they get shut down or attempt to get shut down, and this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I think people don't know that the studies people see a study, right? They just see a headline, red meat is bad for you, or, high cholesterol causes heart disease, or they see these headlines and they don't go to the studies. First of all, they read the headline mostly. Some people read the first couple of paragraphs. Very few people make it through an entire article, and almost nobody ever clicks on the studies that are cited in the article. And I think it's so important that people do that, because you can go to the study and you can actually read that study. And I know it's scary because the scientific jargon, are you going to be able to understand it? But click on the study and look at that study and read it, because you'll see in most cases who it was funded by. And a lot of times these are funded by big food companies or big pharmaceutical companies. And in something like 75% of studies, they find a favorable outcome for the people who funded the study. These aren't like blind studies. And then the ones that say that meat is bad for you have what in the studies? What are the people eating in the study when it says the meat's bad for you?
Well, these people are from the plant-based meat companies, a lot of them.
Yeah. And then they do things like, it's like a pizza with pepperoni on it. So they call it, a meat-based meal. It's a hamburger at McDonald's on a bun with all the stuff on it, with the fries, with a milkshake or with a soda. And people just read that headline and they think, oh, the meat is bad for me. But really, it's not the meat. It's all the other things that were served with the meat.
They're trying to, a hot dog is equivalent to a ribeye on a plate. How absolutely ridiculous is that? But people don't question it. They, like you said, they read the headline.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to keep pushing, right? We got to keep talking about it. We got to keep telling people, because the more times we do this, the more times we talk about it, the more people we're going to help.
Yeah, and it's only growing. Since stepping into this, I guess, community, this world over the last couple of years, you don't realize how many people are out there doing God's work to try and push for this, which is so, I've only got hope. Back when I was sick, I didn't have hope, but being a part of this movement, making this content and seeing the discussion that's created in some of these, in the comment section on some of these videos is just absolutely beautiful. And I've only got hope that we're figuring this out, because you even look at people like RFK and the whole Make America Healthy Again. When have you ever seen that? Like, this is incredible. So having someone, a political figure like that, so high up, talking about how seed oils are bad, how processed foods are bad, glyphosate's bad. This is what we've needed, and it's starting to happen. The shift is here.
And then Casey and Callie Means on Tucker Carlson. I mean, it doesn't get much better than these primetime things. I think Callie was just, or maybe it was Casey, was on Fox News just the other day talking about this. I mean, that's what we need. We need more of that. We need more people having these conversations about the food, so that the parents like me who have never listened before will be watching the news and hear a little bit of it, have it make a little, I mean, it just has to make a little bit of sense to send somebody on a rabbit trail, right?
Yeah.
And get them to look at it and think, wait a minute, maybe that's why my kid acts up. Maybe that's why my kid doesn't get good grades. Maybe like it just a little bit can send somebody down that rabbit trail.
Oh, 100%. And what better people than, say, Callie and Casey Means, who have been from that system, who have seen it, have seen how it works, the inner workings of it, and they can bring that to the public and explain things. And they're very articulate, well-spoken people. Sometimes
Yes,
I struggle to string a sentence together, and I listen to these guys and I'm like, wow.
I
And
know.
it's incredible to have people like that at the front lines who are not scared to tell the truth.
Yeah, I could binge watch their videos over and over and over again, and just one right after the other. And it all just makes such sense. So if you guys haven't seen any of their stuff yet, and it would be hard at this point for people to have not seen their stuff, definitely go look for them. Scotty, this was a really great conversation. We should definitely do this again in a couple of months, maybe
Please.
do some updates and talk about some other stuff. But you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, sure, sure. I'm on most social media platforms, Instagram, Scotty Brizzle, TikTok, Scotty Brizzle, Facebook, YouTube, or Scotty Brizzle. That's BRIZZLE. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. And hopefully in those couple months when we can chat again, I've made some more controversial videos that can
Yeah.
ruffle some feathers. And yeah, we'll have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, you have such good videos. I think most people should go and binge some of yours, just like I've been binging yours and Callie and Casey Means. And because there's so much information there, you really break down the information, like about the tobacco industry and about like lab grown meat and things like that. You just really open up, such a wide spectrum of information and ideas for people to kind of browse through. So thank you for doing that. I mean, your videos are really good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So yeah, let's see what I've got next. But hopefully hopefully it can help people to maybe just get
Mhm.
on the health journey themselves and just sort of see a lot of the lies and deception that we've been told. So yeah, doing it for the good.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. Thank you guys so
Mm.
much for watching. I'll see you next time. Be safe, be well.